skateboarding meant more to you than just being cool and having friends. Like, it was your thing to, like, get away. It was kind of a life or death thing.
Through observation and recording, Minding the Gap tells the coming-of-age story of director Liu Bing himself and his friends from a personal perspective. Unlike other documentaries, the identity of the director in this documentary has been transformed. He is not only a documentarian, but also a narrator who participates in the story. As one of the main characters, the narration from the director's first point of view is more likely to make the audience empathize with him. So we will analyze how this documentary deals with the first-person point of view of the director.
God, no, you've been filming the whole time. I thought you were, like, taking a picture.
Take one.
I'm making this film because I saw myself in your story.
I always felt like I didn't fit in with my family.
My parents ran this very controlling house. I ran away a lot.
Skateboarding is more of a family than my family.
The story of the film stems from childhood trauma. In the film, Liu Bing tries to find answers about his childhood experiences through the camera. The films tell the story of three skateboarding boys in a self-documentary style. In the film, Zach lives in a single-parent home where his parents remarry, but when he also becomes a father, he cannot avoid repeating his family's mistakes and commits domestic violence against his wife. Here suffers similarly to Zach, with arguments and beatings seeming to be the norm during his teenage years, culminating in him running away from home. The film's director Liu Bing, who is also a character in the film, suffers from domestic violence at the hand of his stepfather when his mother remarries. The images give Liu Bing a way to face his past, allowing him to look at himself, his family, and his life again. The film opens with a shot of a couple of boys with skateboards climbing from a fire escape to a roof, followed by music and a voiceover that begins,
Your whole life, society tells you, like, oh, be a man, and you're strong, and you're tough, and margaritas are gay. You don't grow up thinking that's the way you are. When you're a kid, you just do, you just act. And then somewhere along the line, everyone loses that.
The narration in the form of a confession shows the film's theme of growing up and losing oneself. The narration shifts from objective to subjective, from an emphasis on absolute authority to self-expression. As mentioned above, the narration of Minding the Gap adopts a lot of confessions, and its full self-expression definitely informs the audience of the characteristics of the film, personal and subjective. After 6 minutes of the film, the director walks into the skateboard shop and interviews the owner of the shop about his impression of him, as follows.
I don't really remember when I first met you. You were just like kid that was always there, you know? Like, you'd come into the skate shop. I don't know, we'd talk about random stuff. And that happened with a lot of kids.
The scene next cuts to a set of metaphorically charged shots of the director filming himself into the camera and using the camera to film himself in the mirror, which is still narrated by the skate shop owner.
But I can't remember when you opened up to me about your mom and stuff. But you never really told me about anything about what was going on with you.
Here, the film visually switches perspectives, and the voiceover leads the viewer to see how the language of the camera portrays the little boy in the shop owner's words. That is, the director himself.
I grew up a very shy kid in a town that didn't have a lot of people that looked like me, and I just always felt like I was on the outside. I quickly realized that as the person holding the camera, you get treated a little differently.
From the audience's perspective, they think that the interview is describing the boy, but the objectivity of the interview is interrupted by the camera's self-examining perspective. In fact, the character portrayed in the film is the director himself, who is making a self-portrait through the mouths of others. In a passage talking about Kia, Kia talks about the domestic violence he was subjected to by his father.
Like sometimes I know that I have to work with him, so I would sneak out my window, like throw my boy out first and just climb out. And then when I got home, I got disciplined, and I wasn't able to skate for a while.
How did you get disciplined?
I mean, well, they call it child abuse now, but it's not really child. Bitch! That shit makes you angry, like, oh god.
The film is added in a parallel montage, with Kia's childhood appearing to the audience. In the film, Kia slammed his skateboard so hard that he ended up crushing it. The skateboard embodies Kia's restless and emotionally complex adolescence,
How bad did it get?
and at the same time, the skateboard is also the bond of friendship between Kia and Liu Bing, which witnesses the two teenagers' stumbling growth experience.
I mean, wouldn't you?
I did cry.
I feel like everybody cried.
Here, as the director, Liu Bing concludes the passage with his response as a son, suggesting that he and Kia were completing an identification that domestic violence can cause childhood trauma. In Zach's story, Zach is unable to adapt to the role of a father and can only vent his emotions through quarrels and scolding his life with his wife.
Going down my eyebrow. He broke his coffee tables with my body. Like,
In the end, Zach chooses to run away again, just as he left home at the age of 16. The lack of family values and affection is always present in every aspect of his life. Liu Bing's conversation with Nina, Zach's wife, is also an attempt to understand his mother from the perspective of a wife who has also been subjected to domestic violence.
right. I don't think
she
they...
had the same idea. She was like, I don't want to speak out, you know.
Right, I mean... I don't know. Especially, like, with me and him, like, kind of being okay right now and, like, hanging out, like, all that would go down the drain.
Okay.
But, yeah. That took a long time.
The stories of Zach and Kia may seem to be narrated from the director's third-person perspective, but in fact, the director has incorporated first point-of-view thinking and dialogue into it. While telling other people's stories, Liu Bing has also been searching for his own answers. Liu Bing's interview with his mother in Minding the Gap is an extremely important part of the film, and this part is shot in a very unusual way. From the narrative point of view, the documentary angle of the film is interrupted, with lights, camera, interviewer, and interviewee, all included in the shot. And even before the formal interview, the director asks the mother to clap her hands under the microphone to test the volume, and the footage that belongs to the documentary production process is retained in the film without being cut. Liu Bing also reminds the audience that
in the movie. So it's like you know. So like even when during the interview when you like shoot me and getting my reaction shots, it'll like maybe I don't know.
the reflective documentary style of this section indicates the director's desire to adopt a multi-perspective narrative. On one hand, the director as the narrator of the story is telling the story. On the other hand, the story is about the director as a character, creating an overlapping effect of identities. This subjective narrative sequence effectively helps the director Liu Bing to express and describe his experience of self-growth. Liu Bing begins by asking a direct question about the roots of his childhood trauma, asking his mother if she knew that he was often treated violently when he was alone with his stepfather, a question that his mother could barely face up as she replied,
I don't know what to say now. I wish I can go over it, do differently, but I don't know what to say now. It's all past.
Then Liu Bing continued to ask when his mother suffered domestic violence. But ultimately, the mother told Liu Bing that most of the time his stepfather was still friendly, and that, as a woman, she longed to get married and have children rather than end up alone.
But I just am not that way. I want to have kids, I want to marry, I don't want to be alone.
There are frequent pauses and gasps in the mother's answers, and the scene cuts to a close-up of Liu Bing's puzzled face as he tries to ask some more questions, but is interrupted by his mother. And ultimately, the interview comes to an abrupt end. Both the mother, Liu Bing, in the camera, and even Liu Bing as the director are in a hurry to draw a conclusion in this passage, creating a blockade of expression and suggesting the predicament of the mother-son relationship.
When I saw the footage and saw that he'd built one of those, complicated lighting setups for a simple interview where he was kind of separated from her in that way, and you see that visually, and then at the end when he says, I'm done.
I cut.
It's very, very powerful. He ends it. He just can't take it anymore.
In self-documentaries, the filmmaker tends to integrate into the film and make a shift in perspective, so that scenes of his or her own emotions, life experiences, and state of mind are presented in the film. In self-documentaries, the director integrates his personal feelings with the content of the film and speaks to the audience through straightforward video language. In Minding the Gap, the audience can see that the director himself is overlapping with the character in the film, changing from the photographer to the photographed, making himself available to narrate from first point of view, which makes the story more real and has social significance. In the film, the subjective and objective perspectives are constantly intertwined. Minding the Gap uses private records to make the audience and themselves think about the real life around them, so as to complete the reconstruction and reflection of the self.
One of the hopes of this film is that people talk about intergenerational abuse and trauma. But unless we talk about it and address it, it will continue on. Don't just judge Zach, or don't just judge Bing and his mom, or Nina for not necessarily talking about it or for accepting it. But how can we use their story to understand and make a change in the future?